Addressing Gettysburg.
Oops. Switch up top. There you go. There you go. How's that? Hey, how's that? How's that? All right, here we go. The amazing Matt. There you go. How about Matt Calorie over here? You get his phone right there. There you go. Oh, Matt. That's John Wayne's kid over here. He's doing the laughing. We had a kid here a couple of weeks ago. It was such a fine presentation that he was up there by Miss Amy. Miss Amy's here, Angie, about 3 rows below you. Anyway, the ranger, whoever it was, out-of-town guest, paused in between speaking, and I was standing up here, and I was like, who is snoring over there? I was like, there's some kid laid out across so I don't know. It's gonna, yeah. All right, so what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about Dan Sickles and the New York Monument Commission. Now, in true Ranger fashion, I had to give the title for the program before I actually wrote the program. So my intentions were to talk about the New York Monument Commission. What I ended up with, or what interested me in the end, I should say, I could give you all these stats about and I will, about monuments and all this stuff. But my objective here, secondary objective or primary objective or dual objective, is to try to show you what Dan Sickles did with the New York Monument Commission, what Dan Sickles' opinion, his opinion, was of the Battle of Gettysburg, and number 3, try to show you what Dan Sickles was like as a person. And the title does not reflect that, you know, but it does reflect that the talk centers on the post-war years. Okay? So if I'm wandering around or not talking about the New York Monument Commission, that's the reason right there. In 1886, New York, the state of New York, created a Monuments Commission and named Sickles the head chairman. Here in this great task of his life, he would serve beside fellow New Yorkers Henry Slocum, Joseph Carr, and Charles Richardson to honor the men from the Empire State, the largest percentage of any northern state killed or wounded at the Battle of Gettysburg. During the course of his work, he would direct the erection of the New York State Monument, which is today in our National Cemetery, and scores of other smaller monuments, and along with the supervision of sculptors, artists, surveyors, engineers, and foundries. From the work of his commission with New York sprouted granite and bronze symbols of men who strode in battle decades before and which still stands to this day. Sickles would also oversee a comprehensive 3-day map and also make sure that his men, those boys in blue that have fought beside him, would attend reunions and monument dedications and be fed and housed. Sickles devoted countless hours and gave everything he had in this role or in this endeavor. But Sickles, to make the understatement of the program, was a complex man. And one thing that always was in the back of Sickles' mind was his legacy. You want to understand Dan Sickles, what does a politician care most about? He cares most about his reputation, right? All right. That will stop the comments there. So how would history remember Sickles or remember himself and the decisions he made on this battlefield? So this, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of Dan Sickles and the post-war years. So before that, how many of you, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but how many of you, and this is fun for me, I hope I have a few here, how many of you have never heard the story of Dan Sickles before? Anybody in the crowd? Pirates? Who else? You're not gonna, girlfriend not gonna raise her hand? No, I'm not gonna do it. to be that guy. All right. Right there. So there's two significant things to Dan Sickles in his life. Two major events that define his life. Well, he wouldn't agree with that, but to me it is. There was an incident in 1859, which if you don't know, keep laughing, madam. If you don't know the story, I don't want to get in front of it, but it's one of the most amazing U.S. history stories or jurisprudence stories from our nation's history. You got to hear this. And then number two, I would think the seminal event of his life was Gettysburg and the decision. Now, we're going to spend more time on Gettysburg and the park and everything, but you will never understand Sickles without understanding the backdrop. Now, ladies and gentlemen, a lot of you have commented when I went around today and greeted all of you about this white appendage on the front of my face right here. And a lot of you are probably wondering what happened to 52-year-old Matt and what made him prematurely gray like that or white like that. Well, there's always a good reason for everything. So the first reason you're about to find out. And in order to give you a hint of why I'm prematurely gray right here, we would like to welcome Miss Emma Atkinson to tell us about the murder and Dan Sickles right here. All right, here we go. Now, my original plan was to set them down and to tell them the story myself. But before I even got out of bed, on Sunday mornings, they come rushing up the stairs, all right? And so when they came in the bedroom, they piled in, and I told them my story while I was laying there, what I intended to do, and they just said, "No, Dad, we'll just read it." I said, "Okay, all right." So out went the story I did. Now, for those of you that are Gettysburg aficionados or Sickles aficionados, I'm simply using Wikipedia. Okay, I got it. All right. All right, let's take a deep breath right now. Let's relax a little bit. It's going to be fine. Okay, so, all right. So Miss Emma is going to tell you about the murder. Okay, let me get beside you so maybe you can hear you when you go out. Okay, go ahead. I'll hold it.
Okay, so in 1859, Sickles was arrested for murder. His wife had turned to another man for attention. This was Francis Barton Key, son of Francis Scott Key, which wrote the Pledge of Allegiance. Star Spangled Banner.
Oh, here we
Can I just keep reading?
Yeah, just keep reading.
Okay. Sickles repeatedly shot Key in front of his home, which was also in front of the White House. Sickles had a team of lawyers representing him, led by E. Edwin M. Stanton, future Secretary of War. It says state, but it's war.
Wikipedia, right? There you go.
Under Abraham Lincoln. Sickles was released on what the first successful plea of temporary insanity. Sickles already had a questionable reputation, but his incident made him a pariah. Sickles saw the outbreak of the Civil War as an opportunity to save his
You got it.
reputation.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. All right. And to show, okay, so that's this. Okay, right here. That's this side right here. And to show you what causes the other half of prematurely graying here is none other than Miss Aubrey Atkinson, who will be coming up here right now to... We used the curling iron this morning. Worked hard on this hair. Right here, let me find where you start reading here. We're down here somewhere. Major General, let's get him a Major General here. You won't get us where you just want to read there? Okay. Now I know, wait a minute. I need, just nothing to do with you. I know what's being said, all right? I didn't change it. It's all part of the, all right, so nothing, all right, go ahead, okay. It's just, I thought it was too good to change. Go ahead, all right, start reading.
On June 27th, Hooker resigned as commander of the Army of the Potomac. Among the corps, commanders suggested to replace him, the New York Herald actually suggested Sickles as the best commander for the job. On June 28th, 3 days before the Battle of Gettysburg, Lincoln appointed General George G. Meade to replace Hooker. On July 1st, the first day ended in Confederate victory. Meade worked to quickly put his forces in place for the next day battle. Early on the morning of July 2nd, Meade sent a message to Sickles with the instructions to place his 12,000-man corps on Sedimentary Ridge. He was specifically ordered to connect to General Winfield Scott Hancock, his 2 corps on his right, and extended his line to Little Round Top on his left. Sickles, not impressed with his new commander or his orders, rode to Meade's headquarters about 11 a.m. and waited to see Meade, but the commander was busy at the time. Feeling ignored, Sickles returned to his troops. He decided he did not like his orders. A mile to his...
Pause. New sentence. A mile?
A mile to his front was Emmitsburg Road, which was higher ground than he assigned to occupy. He also did not like the fact there were rocks and trees along his line. Sickles, without orders or without informing the other corps commanders, moved his corps forward about 1 mile. This left Hancock's left flank completely open and a large break in the line, where his corps was supposed to be. The new position he chose was wider than one he abandoned, and he did not have enough men to cover it. Completely. The middle of his line formed a right angle in the line that could be attacked from 2 directions.
Pause right there and keep your thing. I should have done this. I'm sorry, we're not keeping up with the slides. What do you think about Dapper Dan, huh? What do you think about that right there? Nice, huh? So this is Mrs. Sickles. I got to catch up with my slides right here. She was 16. He was 32 when they got married, and she was 20 at the time of the incident right there. So I take it she's about that age right there. And of course, this is Philip Barton Key, who was the district attorney of Washington. So you have actually 2 lawyers, one lawyer shooting another lawyer is what you have right there. And there you go. And so, anyway, getting to where Emma is. I put this on here. I didn't know if any of you have seen this, but this is, it didn't show up too well, but this is the best I could do getting the whole page. This is Sickles' home, this is Sickles' home on Lafayette Square in Washington. This is what the house looked like. And that is a depiction of Philip Barton Key talking to Mrs. Sickles. You can't make her out, but she's in the window up there. And they used to rendezvous with that. Anyway, they had a house which they would rendezvous a couple blocks away. That's one thing this program taught me. I thought the rendezvous house was across town, like maybe in Georgetown or something. But no, it's like 2 blocks from Lafayette Square down in Washington. So that was kind of neat. But this was the house. Mrs. Sickles would enter from the rear, apparently. And I'll leave y'all to read the confession, but for the 1800s, it's quite set low expectations. But she's pretty clear of what happened, you know. I don't know what Sickles thought when he said, and this is Sickles being shown his new accommodations, right? But which quickly he told the jailer he couldn't handle the rats, so the jailer gave up his apartment so Sickles could stay in his apartment right there. Anyway, getting to the point about what Aubrey is talking about, Sickles is ordered to occupy this position, and he subsequently, on his own initiative, she's going to finish the story, is going to move out to the peach orchard. And when she says salient, that's what they're talking about. See how the flank is in the air and it goes along Emmitsburg Road right here? Okay, so let's start with the middle of his line. Yeah, the middle, right up here.
A right angle in the line that could be attacked from 2 directions.
Brigadier
General Harry Hunt, the artillery chief, inspected the new position with Sickles and pointed out the problems. He said he had to check back with me to see if the orders have gave Sickles could be changed. Sickles made the move anyway. Within an hour, his entire 3 corps was nearly wiped out by Confederate General James Longstreet's corps. Sickles himself was nicked by a cannonball which shattered his leg. He was carried off the field and his right leg was amputated a few hours later. His injury may have saved him from court material for disobeying orders, but his days as a field commander were at an end.
There you go. Whew, no pressure there. So the girls were coming out with me on some Sundays this past summer for the black powder. I wouldn't have to come in all day, and I'd come out and do 3 or 4 hours on Sunday and go home, since it was my normal day off. But that's where we got started. I had them get up in front of the crowds and start doing the safety message, this past winter. So they're slowly, just like Ben did, if you look in those things, they're slowly acclimating to getting out here. Thank you, ladies. That was very, very good for you, ladies. All right. So the murder, just to fill in a few gaps that wasn't in Wikipedia, the murder took place on February 27th, 1859. It was a 3-week trial. You'll never see this today, but they convened a trial. The court apparently was seasonal, and the court happened to be in session when Sickles shot Keyes, so they were able to move to a quick trial. And the trial took place in April, the 1st of April. It lasted for 3 weeks and returned with a verdict on April 26, 1859, saying that Sickles was not guilty of murder due to temporary insanity. Right there, all right? I could do the whole program, and then one day, there's so many good ideas you could do here. Maybe one day we'll do the whole program on Sickles and the murder trial. If I can ever get permission to do 1859, One of the curious things moving to the Civil War, though, ladies and gentlemen, is that if you don't know, I would love to know who you are. None of you raised your hand except for the brave pirate fan over here. Is that You got nothing to lose. Oh, come on now. Cam's just worried about me picking on him. This strangest thing, I could spend the whole program on this, but Sickles' leg was amputated down here, we think by Jim Hessler's book. I basically went through all 4 biographies. Pynchon, if I'm Pinchon, if I'm saying that correctly, has a lot on the post-war years. Mr. Hessler, though, says that the evidence that his leg was amputated by the outlets is kind of vague. It may have been at a hospital and then moved. He was moved out to there subsequently, you know, or it may have taken place at that farmstead right by the outlet. I don't know. But anyway, the point is, Sickles saved his leg. And now you today, the American taxpayer, are the proud owner of Dan Sickles' leg. This is Sickles on the left visiting his leg, right here. He became very perturbed when they didn't keep all of it, because he had almost a complete hip amputation. You know, we sit here and Dan Sickles, we're going to have a lot of laughs here today, but Dan Sickles had an almost complete leg amputation, which is very, very, very hard to survive. The higher the extremity on the limb, the less the probability of survival. And you know Dan Sickles? They put a bucket above him, I don't know why I'm telling you, but they put a bucket above him that was leaking, and they let that water drip on his stump all the time. Whatever it did, it kept it clean. All right, so anyway, going to the post-war years. From 1865 to 1867, he commanded the Department of South Carolina, the Department of the Carolinas, the Department of the South, and the 2nd Military District. Basically the same thing, but they just kept changing the title. In 1866, he was appointed Colonel of the 42nd U.S. Infantry, Veteran Reserves, and in 1869, he was retired with the rank of Major General. Sickles served as the U.S. Minister to Spain from 1869 to 1874, and he took part in the negotiations surrounding the Virginius affair, which I had never heard about. So I looked into it. So very briefly, I bet Carlton knows about the Virginius affair. The Virginius affair resulted from an American ship that was captured by Spain attempting to run in Cuban revolutionaries to overthrow Spanish rule on the island. Well, the local governor didn't like that. And before Washington and, is that Madrid? Who's the capital of Spain? Before they could get involved, the governor took care of the problem. All right? And he ended up shooting 53 men as pirates. Yeah. And America was not happy. Washington told Sickles, meaning the capital, told Sickles to get after the Spanish government about it, and guess what? Since he was over there, he did. And Sickles cabled to Washington saying that he was promoting war. In other words, he was right in the Spaniards' faces telling them that this ain't gonna do. Meanwhile, unknowns to Sickles, the Secretary of State, Hamilton Fish, was negotiating directly with Spain and circumventing his ambassador, Sickles. Well, it's probably good that Hamilton Fish got involved because they prevented a war. Because Sickles was sure getting one. And Sickles resigned and came home in a huff. And that sets us up for the New York Monuments Commission. Now, while he was over there, ladies and gentlemen, I would like you to know that Dan Sickles, I don't know my Spanish history, but apparently there was a revolution in Spain and they deposed the monarchy. And so the Queen of Spain fled to Paris, where she was in exile. And from there, I don't know how often, how frequent, it's not really germane to this, Chris Gwynn would like that, germane to this program, but Sickles would travel from Spain to Paris, where he took up, reportedly, well, it wouldn't be an affair. What would it be an affair? Was she dead by then? I can't remember if his first wife was dead by then. It wouldn't matter anyway. He took up a relationship with the deposed Queen of Spain. And ladies and gentlemen, you are about to be, without me having to say anything, we'll see. Sickles has a lot of negative qualities, but as you are about to see, ladies and gentlemen, he also had a very patriotic quality to him also. As you can see, right here, Sickles put country before self. This is the Johnny Carson moment where I don't say anything, you know, and just saying, just like, yeah, well, you know what they sang. This will give y'all fits trying to find this one, you know. I think Sickles needed a woman about twice my weight, right? A lot of fun who packs a gun with all that other freight. Find her in a sideshow. Leave her in L.A.? Never mind. Y'all can figure that out yourself. One guy ought to know it, though. The hippie better know it. Apparently in her mind, though, I don't know if Dan Sickles stood out. She apparently had a lot of, you know, I don't know what you call it on a royal level. Consort? I don't know. But Sickles was one of them. Now this lady right here, I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. Her name is Senorita Carmina Cray. I hope I'm saying that. Creagh. And I can't pronounce this, but she was the daughter of Chevalier de Cray of Madrid, a Spanish counselor of state. And Sickles, she was part of the court of Queen Isabella. So ask me how that all works, how you get from the queen to the lady in waiting and all that. But Sickles ends up marrying this lady in 1871 is what you need. Now you remember that because I'll be back to her in a little while. They had 2 children together, and he returned to the United States, Sickles did, in 1874 and began to practice law again, where he also became sheriff for a brief period of time. If you can imagine, Dan Sickles is a sheriff. But the important thing for you to remember before I leave her is she is left in Europe. I would assume Spain, but she is left in Europe. She does not come to America with Sickles. So Sickles' 2 children are in Europe, his wife. Sickles returns to America alone. As stated previously, New York had created a Monuments Commission in 1886 with the stated goal of the commission was to, quote, determine such positions and movements by means of such records, reports, maps, and surveys as may be had, and by such other aids and means as they may judge necessary therefore, and report to the legislature recommendations to secure the permanent marking of the movements and positions of such troops. Only a lawyer could write such a one sentence. Sickles would use his position as chairman of the NYMC to help secure his version of events of the battle. Time and again, both in personal statements, public speeches, or newspaper interviews, Dan Sickles never wavered from his opinion that his forward movement at the Battle of Gettysburg had been the right one. One good example, in 1902, when the New York at Gettysburg volumes were published, many of you Gettysburg buffs probably have a copy of that, or soon will, right there. The history of the battle and its relations to Sickles' forward movement read like this. Okay, so Sickles sends out a reconnaissance in force. If you've ever wondered why there were Union monuments on the Confederate side of the battlefield, that's from Dan Sickles' reconnaissance on July 2nd. That's why there are Union monuments on West Confederate Avenue today. But anyway, Sickles sends out that reconnaissance. They bump into Confederates over there by the present-day Park Amphitheater. Confederates push them out of the woods, or they fall back out of the woods, and they come back and they tell Sickles that the Confederates are moving into position. Now listen, this is the quote. I picked this is a long paragraph, but I picked this one paragraph out of New York at Gettysburg because I can sit here and read to you all day long about Sickles' opinion of himself in Gettysburg. But this paragraph basically tells you everything that it is Dan Sickles' viewpoint. Is what I'm about to tell you. I'm not asking you to agree with it. This is Dan Sickles' viewpoint. And remember, he's a lawyer. So he looks at things, he doesn't look at the facts. He looks at the law, which are two different things, okay? So facts have nothing to do, all right? Where'd the guy go? Back here. Yeah, see, he didn't even smile. It's Coke, by the way. Okay, so New York at Gettysburg. General Sickles was confronted here. Do y'all want to read? One of y'all want to read? You won't? Come on. We're going to read that paragraph right there. Let me take the microphone up. Yeah, just start with General Sickles.
General Sickles was confronted here with questions of the
Gravest
character. On his decision, the fate of the battle might depend. His corps comprised that the only troops on that part of the field, and the fate of the the enemy was missing on his immediate.
Oh, I forgot my glasses, darling. Point to immediate front and flank.
Mm-hmm. If he
occupied
around
round tops,
he could not hold the ground between him and Hancock.
That's it.
If he reminded where he was, the round tops would be occupied by the enemy, and his position became immediately
untenable.
Sickles goes on to say that the loss of the ground would threaten communications along the Emmitsburg Road. General Sickles hardly hoped to withstand the onset where he was, but he could modify his position. Right?
That's it.
General Sickles receiving no reply from headquarters
exercised
the discretion customary in such cases. He decided to occupy the strong line from the base.
Strong line?
Huh?
I'm mocking Sickles, not you, darling. Go ahead.
Strong line from the base of Little Round Top to the ridge.
Yeah.
At the Peach Orchard along the Emmitsburg Road and meet the impending attack there instead of awaiting it on the lower ground, which the corps then occupied.
All right, there we go. Thank you. Let's sit down. I love it. Okay, so to rehash what he said right there is basically he exercised the discretion that was customary at the time, and he moved his corps forward. In other words, Sickles would go to his dying day saying that position which he took saved the Union Army. Okay? Now, I won't show for a show of hands, but I would imagine that we might have 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10, something like that, disagree with Sickles' move to the peach orchard. But as far as understanding Dan Sickles, the one thing you need to understand, ladies and gentlemen, is he never backed up. That what she just read, what Emma just read, is what he would go to, and he would never deviate. I could give you that one paragraph in a different form multiple times, but Dan Sickles, the lawyer, never admits guilt. Right? I don't mean to pick on the lawyers, but you have to understand, when I pick up, they're trained to look at something. They're different from historians, right? They're out to prove their point. Facts have nothing to do with it, right? You're out to win the case. So, and that's how he writes. That's the way he thinks. Now, Sickles did work, though. I don't mean to, to diminish that. As commission chairman, he had to resolve many disputes. In 1888, former Union Chief of Artillery Henry Hunt chastised him for the placement of Smith's battery in Devil's Den. He became deeply involved in the 111th New York Monument's placement also. His tenure took him to other fields, such as Chattanooga. There's pictures of him at Vicksburg, Andersonville, Antietam, and Cold Harbor. One-legged Dan Sickles. Perhaps the peak of Sickles' performance as chairman was New York Day in 1893. On this day, the New York State Monument was dedicated in the cemetery, complete with the relief of Sickles being wounded. It's the only place you can find Sickles on the battlefield is the New York State Monument, at least a relief of him. And I believe the Lincoln Speech Memorial, isn't he on the back of that? His name is on the back of that too. But so the 44th New York Monument on Little Round Top, that's the big castle, and the Excelsior Brigade Monument, which is out near the Peach Orchard, was also dedicated. However, besides the monuments, perhaps the biggest thing Sickles accomplished was bringing attention to the commercialization of the battlefield. Do we not still fight that battle today? There's, look at Baltimore Pike. When the visitor center left here, they were fighting it back then, and they were fighting it today. Despite being on the New York Monuments Commission, as most of you know, Sickles never had a corpse statue erected. Why? That is open to debate, and there are many opinions on the subject of why out of 7 Corps commanders, only 5 of them have a statue here. However, in 1887, Sickles received an honor that lasts to this day. He had an avenue named in his honor, the longest one on the battlefield, Sickles Avenue. The irony is that his road would not exist today unless he had made that forward movement. Escapes a lot of people. Yeah, see, Sickles not a dummy. He knows what he's doing. He's got his eye on his legacy. Now, one of the interesting things to me about the NYMC is that from 1886, but mostly 1888 to 1893, check this out. Can you imagine this happening today? The state of New York, in that time period from 88 to 93, in 5 years, placed 86 monuments on the field. 86 monuments were dedicated. That's an incredible amount of work. Incredible amount. The question that begs answering, though, is what purpose did the NYMC serve after this? After it was all done. I don't know if I really have an answer for it, but I'm sure it has something to do with the commission, staying in a commission. It has something to do with a guy named Daniel E. Sickles. In his defense, though, the NYMC was probably still dedicating monuments on other battlefields. Now, they were pretty much through here at Gettysburg, but the commission remained. And when the commission remained, so do the funds. All right, Sickles remains in charge. Now, a couple little trivia here for you. I just thought y'all might find this interesting. Sickles did not shy away from controversy either. Of course, as you know, the 42nd New York Monument has given fits to first-time visitors here at Gettysburg for years. If I can remember, if I could recall how many times somebody's come up to me to the desk and asked me how many that they never knew that there were Indians at the Battle of Gettysburg, right? So Sickles, how did that come about? So it was a controversial monument when it was placed, and you also have to remember that it was controversy also at that time period when this is dedicated with the 72nd Pennsylvania Monument. For those of you who don't remember, that's the famous one with the club musket at the high water mark, right? Everybody's on the back of the quarter right there. Well, if you know your Gettysburg background history, that monument is, as far as an erection of a monument, was probably arguably the most controversial monument in Gettysburg Park history, administrative history, because the 72nd Batchelder, our historian, wanted the 72nd monument back on the toll road, and they sued. And it went all the way to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. And when they went to the Supreme Court, what did the lawyers do? They solicited testimony. And I'm not saying don't everybody go rush out to the bookstore to buy off all the copies of the case right there. But they recorded veterans' testimony about where the 72nd, and they got other people in there. It is a very good resource for the high water mark in July. Not that Sickles wanted that to happen. But here's how Sickles couldn't resist himself. So he's at the dedication of this monument. The 72nd still controversy, Pennsylvania's still going on. Here's how a gentleman takes a cheap shot. Quote, "I have the honor to place this memorial in the custody and care of your association." He's talking to the Gettysburg Battlefield Memorial Association. "I cannot fitly perform this duty without giving expression to the surprise and indignation felt by the veterans of this famous battalion when they see their monument standing in a rear line from which they advanced and repulsed the approaching enemy, whilst troops that refused to advance," he didn't say who they were, "in obedience to repeated orders of their brigade commander, are permitted to place their monument on a line much further to the front than they ventured to march, until after the victory was won. I knew that the trustees of the battlefield are in no sense responsible for this outrage upon history." Later he said, here's another cheap shot. Later he said, "I don't know why those men were so modest that they would not advance when ordered." Oh my God. And none of y'all know. Anybody know who that is? If you know who that is, I'll die. I'll just walk out this door right now and y'all call that. That is sculptor James Kelly. Right there. Saying you probably are familiar with his work, but you're not familiar with who made it. He's got a lot of sculptures on this battlefield. James Kelly, keep that in the back of your mind. Anyway, he's hard at work on these New York monuments. And to go back to the 42nd, I'm reading this to give you a sense of how Sickles conducted himself. Here's your glimpse into what it would have been like to be in front of Dan Sickles, personally. And an artist, he captures things that nobody else does, even phonetically. Okay, so James Kelly was asked to cast the Indian for the 42nd New York. So there was a lot of controversy. According to Kelly, the artist, he was repulsed at the idea but did not want to let down his friend, New York Monuments Commissioner G.W. Martin, in saying the idea for the monument was just plain dumb. Therefore, when he asked Martin how long he would have to cast, the commissioner gave him a month. In other words, this Commissioner Martin is trying to sabotage the whole Indian idea. This allowed Kelly, the artist who didn't want to do it anyway, an out, and he stated flatly he could not cast the 42nd New York in a month. At the meeting, though, was Dan Sickles. And Kelly recorded not only Sickles' response, but his enunciation. So when Kelly tells the commissioners he can't do it in a month, Sickles responds. And this is Kelly's writing right here. There's a hyphen between each letter. What? Piped Sickles. Not do it in a month? Hyphens again. Why? If I were a sculptor, I could do it in a month. Hyphens again. All you have to do is to get an idea. A vivid I-dia. Right there. Now, this is the way he described him, Kelly did. I mean, the way he looked. Mind you, looking very sagely under his contracted eyebrows, then arching them, shrugging his shoulders, balancing on his crutches, throwing out the palm of his hands with the flourish like a French barber. You must just have an idea right here. And make it. He had it with a touch and go air of finality. Kelly replied, I'm not making that kind of work. Kelly closed with one last barb. Judging from the final monument on the field, Sickles, he puts hyphens in between all these words, must have made it. That's his idea. Carlton's still up there? Carlton came all the way down here. He could be upstairs, you know, doing anything, but when we're going to talk about James Longstreet, he's going to come down. I'm going to tell you something now. Carlton Smith. Nothing going to be said about Longstreet. I'll get corrected, too, when I go back to the office. He'll tell me everything I said wrong about Longstreet. One of the oddest friendships struck up at Gettysburg had to take place at the 25th anniversary of the battle in 1888. Sickles' old antagonist, James Longstreet, made a guest appearance. The two men met at the Springs Hotel, which former grounds just recently passed into park hands. Very nice. The golf course out through there. The two grasped each other warmly and sat down to chat. Can you imagine meeting your opponent from war? Can you imagine such a thing, you know? A few days later, Longstreet and former Chief of Staff Dan Butterfield toured the field together. Yeah. Wonder if they talked about Meade. They were joined on Little Round Top by Sickles, Henry Slocum, and Joseph Carr. During the time they were on the summit, the 146th New York Monument was being dedicated nearby. Upon the completion of the ceremony, the crowd rushed to be around the great men. They were later cheered on by the veterans on their way back to the Spring Hotel. Reunification, people. Can you imagine a Confederate veteran of Longstreet's stature, Lieutenant General in the Confederate Army, and a Major General in the Union Army riding in the same carriage? This is big stuff, people. We take this stuff for granted. This was a sign to the nation in 1888. It's time to go. It's time to move forward. 25 years later. And so they're trying. In Atlanta one year in the 1890s, Longstreet and Sickles attended a St. Patrick's Day banquet. When the two entered the hall, the old Confederate veterans arose and gave them a yell. I wonder what Sickles thought of that. Sickles offered a toast to Longstreet and made the amusing proposition that the old general would sing the Star-Spangled Banner. Y'all ready to sing? No? Sickles noted that Longstreet's rendition wasn't that bad. He also, Carlton, what was the name of that song he stood up on the table and Longstreet sang in 61 with Earl Van Dorn?
I Puritani.
I Puritani, that's right. You'll try to sing that one sometime. Longstreet apparently liked to sing. Afterward, with things running so late, the two could not catch a cab, so they walked back to the hotel, Sickles on his crutches. Of course, the two had imbibed quite heavily, and upon reaching Longstreet's hotel, Sickles said to him, "Longstreet, The streets of Atlanta are very dark and it is very late, and you are somewhat deaf and rather infirm. Now I must escort you to your headquarters. Longstreet said, all right, come on, and we'll have another hand shake over the bloody chasm. And so to the hotel they went and possibly had another drink or two. At the conclusion, Longstreet said to Sickles, Sickles, the streets of Atlanta are very dark and you are lame. And a stranger here, and do not know the way back to your hotel. I must escort you home. And out into the darkness they strode. Along the way, Longstreet said, old fella, I hope you are sorry. Along the way, Sickles said, old fella, I hope you are sorry for shooting off my leg at Gettysburg. I suppose I will have to forgive you, for it's Sunday. Forgive me? Longstreet asked incredulously. You ought to thank me for leaving you one leg to stand on. No idea, do you? No idea. Just hang on, darling. Just hang with it. And he said, at the 1893 Gettysburg reunion, the two met again at Little Round Top. I think I got a picture of that. And so when they got to this, on this particular occasion, Sickles was helping Longstreet navigate the boulders. And Longstreet turned to him and said, Sickles, you can well afford to help me up here now. If you had not kept me away so long on the 2nd of July, 1863, the war would have lasted longer than it did. Can you imagine judging such things right there? Isn't that cool? I found that one yesterday. I could hardly wait to put that one up. Who's that? Right there. Yep. Now, Sickles is not in this picture, and I'm not sure what year this picture is from, but this is Little Round Top. See it? Longstreet on horseback. Pretty cool, isn't it? I'd ask you to stand up, John Wayne, but I see you're a little busy over there. Once in March 1901, at the second inauguration of William McKinley, what do you think about that one, Carl? You know that one. And on May 30th, 1902, at the West Point Centennial, while reviewing veterans of the Spanish-American War, they shared the platform with Theodore Roosevelt. Yeah. That came out of American Scoundrel. It was their last meeting as Longstreet would die in 1904. But before he died, Longstreet gave Sickles what he coveted the most. In a letter of regret for not being able to attend the Slocum Monument dedication, Longstreet wrote, on that field you made your mark that will place you prominently before the world as one of the leading figures of the most important battle of the Civil War. As a Northern veteran once remarked to me, General Sickles can well afford to leave a leg on that field. I believe that it is now conceded that the advanced position at the Peach Orchard, taken by your corps and under your orders, saved that battlefield to the Union cause. It was the sorest and saddest reflection of my life for many years. But today, I can say with sincerest emotion that it was and is the best that could have come to us all, North or South. And I hope that the nation, reunited, may always enjoy the honor and glory brought to it by that grand work. Okay. You know how much flack Dan Sickles has gotten already? He's still alive. You know how much flack? Do you think Dan Sickles, look, you may not like him, but I would not call the man dumb. He's a lot of things, but he's not dumb. He's a very intelligent person, I would say, in my mind. He's able to think on his feet. He's able to react quickly, etc. Basically, and as a lawyer, Basically, your opponent is telling you you did the right thing. If they had a lamination machine back then, Dan Sickles had this in his pocket, and he showed it to everybody that would listen. Look, Longstreet thinks I did the right thing. Well, who else you need if Longstreet thinks that? So, I mean, yeah, he had the letter reprinted, sent them to friends, all the Third Corps veterans. He used it at addresses. 9 years afterwards, Sickles was still sending out copies. Yeah. All right. Now, this is nothing to do with the NYMC, but I do think I wrote this down because I thought you would find it interesting. You want to know what Dan Sickles was like? I'll tell you. This is a good description. Joseph Twitchell, a former minister with the Excelsior Brigade and the best friend of none other than Mark Twain for 40 years. All right, that's Mark Twain on the left. Of course, over the course of his friendship with Twain, Twitchell recounted many stories of Sickles. And in 1906, Twain had a chance encounter with Sickles in his mansion in New York. In true Mark Twain fashion, he left a detailed impression of the general who he recalled as a genial old fellow. It's what Mark Twain said. It's how Mark Twain writes, so it's Mark Twain. He says, "You couldn't walk across that floor anywhere without stumbling over the hard heads of lions and things. It was as if a menagerie had undressed in the place. Then there was almost a decided and unpleasant odor which proceeded from disinfectants and preservatives and things such as you have to sprinkle on skins in order to discourage the moss. It was a kind of museum, and yet it was not the sort of museum which seemed dignified enough to be the museum of a great soldier, and so famous a soldier. It was a sort of museum which should delight and entertain little boys and girls. I suppose that the museum reveals a part of the general's character and make. He is sweetly and winningly childlike. As far as speech mannerisms, Twain thought Sickles talked, quote, smoothly and well-constructed English. His talk is full of interest and bristling with points, but as there is no animation in it, it soon becomes oppressive by its monotony, and it makes the listener drowsy." Wake that guy up over there, will you? Yes, this is good. Twitchell had to step on my foot once or twice. The late Bill Nye once said, you know who that is? I have been told that Wagner's music is better than it sounds. That fallacious description of something which so many people have tried to describe and couldn't does seem to fit the general's manner of speech exactly. His talk is much better than it is, period. No, Twain says, no, that is not the idea. There seems to be a lack there seems to be a lack there somewhere. Maybe Nye would say that, quote, it is better than it sounds. I think that it is. His talk does not sound entertaining, but it is distinctly entertaining. Mark Twain. Now he put italics on not and is right there to get his emphasis apart. Now, Mark Twain, Twitchell had related to the great Arthur that when Sickles had been wounded at Gettysburg and not knowing whether he was going to die or not, had not related to a newspaper correspondent anything connected, quote, with the future world in order to get out of this one in becoming style. Twain further stated, now, when we sat there in the general's presence listening to his monotonous talk, it was about himself. and it is always about himself, and it always seems modest and unexasperating, inoffensive. It seemed to me that he was just the kind of man who would risk his salvation in order to do, quote, last words in an attractive way. And also I will say this, colon, that he never made an ungenerous remark about anybody. Sickles didn't talk bad about people. That surprised me. He spoke severely. He did. He spoke, yeah, he did, Al. He spoke severely of this and that and the other person, officers in the war, but he spoke about them with dignity and courtesy. Like a lawyer. There was no malignity in what he said. He merely pronounced what he evidently regarded as just criticisms upon them. Right there. Shouldn't have stayed out so late. I noticed then what I had noticed once before, 4 or 5 months ago, that the general valued his lost leg way above the one that is left. I am perfectly sure that if he had to part with either of them, he would part with the one that he has got than the one that he lost. In other words, Sickles continued to show off. It made it very apparent to Mark Twain that Sickles was very proud of losing that leg. That's what Twain is saying in his homely fashion right there. The loss of the leg did not damper, here's the part half of y'all been waiting on right here. Did they leave? The girls leave? That's good. Good. Not fit for he is sleeping? Oh, they're good. The loss of the leg did not dampen Sickles' love of pretty ladies. As a senior warden or otherwise, all right? Despite being married, he would have more conquests before his death, even when he was 90. Some of you older gentlemen need to up your game in this room right here. Little damn blue pill around then, I guarantee. Get up and start moving. Get a running start. Okay, focus. So, one lady that caught his eye, and I can't, I'm sorry, I know y'all want to look her up, but I cannot pronounce this name. This lady right here, her name is Princess, I'll just spell it for you. Lwoff. Loff dash Parlaghy, P-A-R-L-A-G-H-Y, P-A-R-L-A-G-H-Y, Parlaghy. Anyway, she's the princess. She was born in Hungary in the mid-1860s, and her exact date of birth seems to vary slightly from one source to another. She was married for a very brief time to a Russian prince, giving her the royal title of princess, which she carried with her the remainder of her life. It was said that from her marriage she had an income of $1 million a year, which she apparently consumed without difficulty. Don't let your conscience bother you over there. The princess had become a renowned portrait artist even before her marriage, and she was good enough to be awarded a gold medal from the Berlin Academy in 1894. So she's no slouch. And her subjects would include royal figures in Europe and then military figures and celebrities here in the United States, which she first visited in 1896 and then again in 1899. Okay, here we get to where we're interested. An announcement was made noting that the princess was returning to America in 1908 with her menagerie of pets and would be staying at the Plaza Hotel in New York City. Despite lengthy negotiations, the Waldorf Astoria Hotel had turned her down. This is the Plaza, right here. While the Plaza staff may not have been thrilled with her animal affections, despite her reputation as a champion for animal protection and care, The princes lived at the plaza in a third-floor suite. This is going to make y'all feel bad about yourself, especially new couples that are starting out right here. This suite had its own chapel, 14 rooms, a private physician, a valet, a Swedish nurse, maids, cook, footman, butlers, 2 couriers, 2 attachés, and her animal companions for 5 years, perhaps to the dismay of the hotel management. If that didn't get you where you needed to be, her menagerie was said to have included dogs, cats, guinea pig, owl, and 2 small alligators. And if that doesn't do it for you, 1 bear. All right, so.
This says there's a lion cub too.
Do not get ahead of the story. You're thinking again. Put the phone down. Put the phone down. Well, she ain't coming around. I'm glad my daughters ain't around. Anyway, and this brings us, without further ado, to our Australian friends occupying the front row right now. Get a shot of her, Stuff Rider, so everybody can see over there, all right? This brings us to the cub, which was named, did you find out?
I'll have to go back to
This was, no, before I show this, hey,
I don't see the name.
Hessler ain't got this. He ain't got this. Y'all ready? You ain't seen this before. Y'all ready? Huh? I got it. I can't believe it. I got it right here. Apparently in about 1911 or 1912, the princess developed a desire to add a lion cub to her menagerie. All right? This was likely a result of visiting the Ringling Brothers Circus, which she offered to purchase a cub directly. The circus politely declined, so the princess went to her friend, Mr. Dan. And guess what? Dan went down there with $250. Everybody's got a price. And Sickles went down there and got a cub, right? On April 17th, 1911, Sickles informed the press he would be giving the 6-week-old cub to the princess in honor of his 50th anniversary of going to the war. She was summoned to Madison Square Garden, and Sickles, holding the young cub, said, "I want you to accept a souvenir of my regard." And I was putting this final touches on this program yesterday and going through all these internet, and lo and behold, I didn't even know this existed. There it is, right there. Wow, you know? You got that. You got that right there. You're going to be searching now. Uh-huh. 3 volumes. The true, definitive story. Yeah. I'm more interested, I like the cub and everything, but what I'm more interested in is that hat. I mean, where do you get something made like that? And what kind of animal produced that? I don't know. You get a custom. What do you want? What would you like, princess? Oh, I just want it, I want a big hat. Make it out of mink. All right. So, yeah. So there it is, right there. Of course, the princess ordered champagne immediately and even sprinkled some over the cub's head. Oh, you can't. I got the champagne. What are you people talking about? I got the champagne. This is the moment. Right here, I got the picture of it. You go around the world and not see stuff like that. Ventura's, 5:30, Fairfield. Tell you all about it. So anyway, there you go. Anyway, she takes up Goldfleck, tells General Sickles she's going to name it General Sickles, and walks out down the road, gets in the carriage, and takes it back to the hotel. If you can imagine putting a cub in a hotel. And I'm talking about money, people. She hired her own trainer for that cub. If you can imagine. It got out of the house one time, out of the plaza, and it was lured back into the room with a piece of raw meat. I don't know what's happening behind that mask. I think you found it funny. All right, so although the cub did quite well for some time, perhaps better than might be expected for a lion living at a hotel, Goldfleck became ill because he never adopted to civilized food. He developed gout and he died on May 21st of 1912. The princes held a formal wake with Goldfleck, reportedly lying in state surrounded by flowers, his toys, and dishes. He was buried because I won't be beat. You believe that? He was buried in a pet cemetery. And you can still go in New York City today and see the cub's grave. Yeah, isn't that crazy? That's just, Al's already typing on his blog and everything. Oh, yeah, man. Now, Dan must have been quite smitten with the princess. After sitting for a portrait, he gave her the name of 200 friends that might be interested. If any of y'all can find that portrait, please let me know, because I looked for it. I could not find the portrait of Sickles. Maybe Jim would know. He also guaranteed her debt at the Plaza Hotel. In 1910, whoever said that's got it right, the hotel informed Dan that her bill stood at $5,500. 6 months later, the Knickerbocker Trust Company came after Dan for the bill because the princess had only paid $750 toward the debt. By this time, Sickles, who had blown through his own fortune and now had blown tens of millions of dollars from his father, was broke. He pleaded for time. In 1912, two banks initiated foreclosure proceedings on him in 1912. And Spanish wife Carolyn Cray, who would return to New York after 27 years of separation. 27 years of being separated. Now, I got a lot of couples in here, and I got a lot of veteran couples in here. Now, you imagine being separated for 27 years and doing this. When she found out that Sickles was in debt, she went immediately down there to basically a pawn shop and took her jewels and pawned them to raise money to pay Sickles' debt off. Oh, it gets worse. You're gonna, because this is, now let me ask y'all who would tolerate this. She shows up in New York City. Oh, y'all are back. She shows up in New York City, and none other, Sickles, you know, in Sickles' defense, okay, let's try both sides here. She's been gone for 27 years. Amen over here, brother? Okay, so she ain't been around for 27 years. Well, Sickles went and got a housekeeper who accompanied him everywhere, Mrs. Wilmerding, who was his secretary. I know, bummer of a name, but she was there. She was living with Sickles. And let me tell you something. Mrs. Sickles arrives from Europe, and she says, you know, I'd like to reconcile with you, Dan, but, you know,
She's gotta go.
Mrs. Wilmerding's got to go. And Dan, who's 90-something years old, proceeds to tell his wife, he's going to be the master of his house. And Mrs. Wilmerding is staying. So what ends up happening, I often find it refreshing, ladies and gentlemen, that in our time, with all the smut that you see in the news and people trying to catch, you know, people doing things and everything, America hadn't changed. They were doing this stuff back then. Mrs. Sickles doesn't move. She goes into residence a couple blocks away in a hotel. And the paparazzi takes up residence in front of Sickles' house as the standoff ensues in the New York tabloids between Mrs. Sickles and Mr. Sickles and Mrs. Wilmerding. It's all playing out in the papers as it's going on right there. So I can't imagine tolerating that on any different level, but many different levels. So anyway, Olivia Carolyn, his wife, declared to a newspaper man, "I will not put up all my money to save his house to have it occupied by him and his housekeeper to the exclusion of me." Well, you did. However, even worse was about to befall the general. New York State Comptroller William Summer audited the New York Monuments Commission books for 1912 and came up with a discrepancy in the expense account of, can you imagine this much money being spent today, of $445,641 expended. Receipts only came to $417,165, a discrepancy of approximately $28,000. The state prepared to come after the treasurer, the commissioners, including the 93-year-old chairman, Dan Sickles. When one of the bravest and final acts of his life, all right, everything's coming toward him. When you're on the board of something, when you get on the board, you are liable for that. You are running the company. You are supposed to make sure that the books, the accounting, everything else is square. When you sign up, that hasn't changed over, 100, 200 years of this country. You're still liable for it. They're coming after the commissioners, not Dan Sickles. Dan Sickles stands up. I like this. That's why I'm going into such detail about it. Dan Sickles tells the comptroller, no. Don't go after them. I'm the chairman. If anybody stands for it, it's me. If you're going to come after somebody, come after me. And Dan Sickles bars his neck for that. Now, you could argue he's 93 years old. What's he going to do? You could probably argue that, as you're about to see, that he considers himself a war hero, But, he stands for the debt. That's beyond a doubt. But he always managed to ease out. From across the nation, once this hit the newspapers, came support. Carlton's still up there? Helen Longstreet wrote and offered to raise money. Carlton didn't have that one. He'll be going back to his files right now. A gentleman from Ohio offered to pay the entire debt, and Sickles' son Stanton put up $5,000 of his own money, bringing the total down to $23,000. Long story short, a $30,000 surety, if I'm saying that right, surety bond. Surety. I can't see my lawyer over there in the middle of the crowd to tell me something. Well, let's just sue somebody. Was arranged for him. The bond was arranged for him and the sheriff who knew Dan personally. So when the sheriff came to the house to place him under arrest, you're talking about a 93-year-old man here, ladies and gentlemen. Dan Sickles, he knew he was coming, and the tabloids knew he was coming, and all the reporters gathered in front of his Fifth Avenue mansion to see the old man arrested for embezzlement. The sheriff, so everybody's there. The sheriff simply comes into the living room. He takes Dan Sickles. Let me say, stand up for me. I ain't got your T-shirt on the thing yet. Here's T-shirt man, everybody. Here he is. There you go. You can applause for him. Go ahead. Must cost him a fortune to make the T-shirt every day right here. He's always got that Yankee hat on too. Why he ain't come over for dinner? But he comes. He goes up to Sickles and he simply grabs Sickles' wrist and he says, "General Sickles, I hereby place you under arrest." And he says, and then Sickles posts bond without ever leaving his home. So I forget, thank you. He goes to, so the sheriff is standing there. It's very awkward, he's friends with him. So one more thing was left to be done. The sheriff apologetically had to ask for the $5.29 fee for the bond. "Ah, yes," the general said. "Eleanor, Eleanor Wilmerding. Eleanor, please get me $5.29. And you know what the housekeeper said?
You don't have it.
Yes, dear. Ooh, I'll tell you what, my house is dirty. Me a Wilmerding. Oh, well, we're going to have to get us something to come over. Help us, aren't we, ladies? We all are by ourselves, starving to death. Huh? Just terrible. Thought y'all were tired of Daddy's cooking. Not good enough. Not good enough to get a stepmom, huh? I'm going to conclude here. I'm close to concluding, but I want y'all to check this out right here. You know, these are the, we have today, ladies and gentlemen, in 2024, going into, how many years is it now since the battle? 161 years after the Battle of Gettysburg. And the vision which Sickles foresaw, this park and everything. I mean, I picked on him a lot. Now, he's fun to pick on. He's got great stories and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. But in the end, what he built, which he had a large proportion in doing, it still stands today. And I wanted to basically close with one of the last speeches that Dan Sickles ever did in his life. He lived for a long time. So I think it captures, this quote here, it captures what I think Sickles wanted to achieve here at the park. Now, you make your own judgments. I don't, you're the audience, so, It's quote, "It is sometimes said that it is not wise to perpetuate the memories of civil war. And such was the Roman maxim." I say that one right? "But our civil war was not a mere conspiracy against a ruler, semicolon. It was not the plot of some militarist to oust a rival from power. It was no pronunciamento." Where'd the lawyer go? Y'all know that. "The conflict that raged from 1861 to 1865 was a war of institutions and systems and politics." There's General Sickles. Here's the high water mark right here. That carriage coming up, pretty cool, isn't it? I would imagine, if I'm looking at this right, this is roughly in the area where that Ambrose Wright iron tablet, Confederate tablet is on the Confederate side. I think that's roughly where that is. General Sickles in his carriage right there. That's just cool. I can't, yeah. And there's your marker right there. Big marker. So, where was I? "The conflict that raged from 1861 to 65 was a war of institutions and systems and politics. It was a revolution ranking in importance with the French Revolution of the 18th century and with the English Revolution of the 17th century, and universal in its beneficent influence upon the destinies of this country, and ineffaceable, y'all don't know it either, in the footprints it left upon the path of our national progress. For all of us, the blue and the gray, it was our heroic age. The memories of such a war are as indestructible as our civilization. The names of Lincoln and Lee and Grant and Jackson never can be blotted from our annals. The valor and fortitude and achievements of both armies, never surpassed in any age, demand a record in American history. And now that time and thought, common sense and common interest have softened all the animosities of war, we may bury them forever, while we cherish and perpetuate as Americans the immortal heritage and honor of belonging to a republic that became imperishable when it became free." Right there. You can applaud for Sickles. Give Sickles a round of applause. This is, before I conclude, I got one more paragraph. This is the Rogers house. This no longer stands on the battlefield. I forget what happened, when it burned or what happened to it. But there is an iron tablet that's on the Emmitsburg Road, and that is, I don't know what I put it near. It's between the Spangler farm and the Sherfy farm. It was right on the road. But anyway, Sickles is watching a reenactment of Pickett's Charge from there, when that is happening right there. Now, he was so old, not to show you he was cutting cartwheels, but he was actually, newspaper reporters said he would nod off during and he would come to, which whenever I see this picture, this is what I think about. Oh, it's a battle coming on. I don't know. That's what he looks like to me, I don't know. That's pretty cool. Yeah. That's Mrs. Wilmerding, that's right. Damn. All right, one last thing, we'll conclude. And after the 1913 reunion was over, and the field started to grow quiet again, that's on the Rogers house, and him signing autographs right there. How'd you like to have that? And the field started to grow quiet again. Sickles had himself driven around for one last look at his beloved monuments. In the words of Edgecombe Pynchon, Sickles gazed upon, quote, the lordly Empire State monolith with his surmounting figure of victory, the cupola of the Excelsior Brigade monument, and the bold statues of Greene and Slocum, Hancock and Reynolds, encircling about them the memorials of 85 New York regiments and batteries, many of them under his command, that had served and suffered with him that day. Could it be a half century ago that this occurred? Suddenly Twitchell, his assistant walking beside him, said in 1913, Dan, I never realized it before, but in all this, right here, there is no monument to you. Only that plaque on the pediment of the stake shaft. With the fleeting sweetness that was much part of him as his crusty dynamism and determination, the general smiled up at him, and he said to Twitchell, he said, never mind, Joe. All this is monument enough, isn't it? Ladies and gentlemen, Dan Sickles and the New York Monument Commission. Thank you. Thank you. Well, I would say that whatever book you want on Sickles, you pick by the title. So in other words, if you want a book focusing on the Battle of Gettysburg and the history of the Monument Commission, I would probably go with Jim Hessler. If you wanted something on the murder, I would probably go with The Scoundrel. If you wanted a positive biography on him, I would go with The Incredible Sickles, if you would like. So the title basically implies everything that's in the book. No, it didn't change my opinion of him. I don't know if there's anything changed. I'm not out to really like him or hate him. I can tell you that I find him fascinating and I admire a lot of things about him. You got to admire a man that's going to take care of business. He would probably receive a lot of income from the real estate properties which his father owned across New York. I mean, he had, when I say millions, his house was on Fifth Avenue. I mean, what more do you want to say? I mean, he had a mansion. I will be on shortly. It will be after March, and I will be on addressing Gettysburg at the secret location, possibly with Cameron. And I want to say to the viewers of Addressing Gettysburg, thank you for your patience. This book has lasted much longer than any
book.
Gesticulation, anything that might, no, you didn't like that word. But I'm trying, I swear I'm trying.
Cool.
As far as what he did with work, I mentioned that he was a sheriff. He did open up his law practice again. I don't know how big or how small that got to. I can't imagine him being a workaholic. But when his father dies, his father apparently not only had money, but he also had real estate. So as far as Sickles' income, I think he had a lot of money coming in from across the city, regardless of whether he was working or not. So basically, he's a man of leisure. Apparently, he went on a lot of hunting trips. Judging by what's in his house, he went to he's probably at a lot of social. Oh, you're messing up the taping.
All right, just start it again now. What was the question now?